After I marry her, there's money. The words came through my car speakers so clearly that I nearly missed the turn onto Maple Avenue. I tightened my grip on the steering wheel. In the back seat, the man lowered his voice. I know what I'm doing, Mark. A pause. No. She doesn't suspect anything. Then. I just need to get through the wedding. I forgot to breathe. Because the man sitting behind me was about to marry my daughter. My name is Helen Parker. I'm 67 years old, a widow, and a retired school secretary. Until that morning, I thought I was driving just another passenger to work. I couldn't have been more wrong. 3 weeks earlier, I had accepted a ride request at 7:46 on a Tuesday morning. A man in a navy suit climbed into my car. Coffee in one hand. Phone in the other. Polite smile. The kind of man mothers hope their daughters bring home. Halfway to downtown, his phone had lit up. I had seen the name on the screen. I pulled into a grocery store parking lot and turned off the engine. My hands were shaking. The phone was still pressed against my ear. Mom? Emily's voice sounded small. Did you hear that? I asked softly. A pause. Then. Yes. A few seconds later, I heard her crying. Not loudly. Just little broken breaths. Oh, sweetheart. I don't understand. Neither did I. For 3 weeks, I had liked this man. I had imagined him sitting at our Thanksgiving table. I had even thought. My daughter chose well. Now I didn't know what to think. What do I do? Emily whispered. I took a breath. I think you need to talk to him. Today? Yes. What if there's an explanation? I looked through the windshield. I had asked myself that same question. Maybe there was. Maybe there wasn't. I don't know. Then she said quietly. Can you come over tonight? Of course. I hung up and sat there for a moment. The world looked exactly the same. Mine didn't. Around noon, my phone rang again. Emily. Her voice was steadier this time. He explained. And? He says you took it out of context. I frowned. What? He said he was talking about paying off his debts. He said once we're married, we'll only have one household. I said nothing. Because those explanations sounded possible. Then she added. He said he loves me. There it was. The sentence that changes everything. What do you think? I asked. A long pause. I think. I believe him. Sweetheart. I know how it sounded. He was crying, Mom. Another pause. He said he's embarrassed. He didn't want me to worry. I could hear hope in her voice. And hope can make almost anything sound reasonable. Then she said something that hurt. You've only known him for 3 weeks. I know. I've known him for 2 years. A pause. And I know his heart. I looked down at my hands. No mother wants to hear. You don't know him. Even when it might be true. Are you angry with me? She asked. No. She sighed. I need to believe he's telling the truth. That frightened me. Not. I believe him. But. I need to believe him. Those are 2 very different things. We said goodbye. I put my phone down. And for the first time since this strange story had begun, I felt helpless. When your child is 5, you can carry them away from danger. When they're 35, all you can do is tell them what you see. Then pray they listen. I started the car. Another ride request appeared. I almost accepted it automatically. Then I looked at the screen. Jason Reed. I stared at his name. He was going home early. Probably to see my daughter. Probably to apologize again. My finger hovered over the button. Then I pressed accept. Because something inside me wasn't settled. Not yet. And I had a feeling. This story was far from over. Jason got into the back seat without looking up. He looked exhausted. Neither had I. Afternoon, Helen. Afternoon. I pulled away from the curb. A few minutes passed before he sighed. The kind of sigh people make when they're carrying too much. Long day? I asked. He laughed softly. You could say that. Then. I think I messed things up. At work? A sad smile crossed his face. No. I already knew. He looked out the window. You ever make a mistake you can't undo? I thought about my marriage. About my divorce. Yes. He nodded. Asking for a friend? That made him smile. Something like that. Then he asked. Do you think people deserve second chances? Sometimes. And if they don't? I glanced at him in the mirror. Then they still have to live with themselves. He looked down at his hands. That answer seemed to stay with him. A few minutes later, his phone buzzed. He looked at the screen. Mark. He declined the call. A second later, it rang again. He declined it once more and turned the phone face down. I pretended not to notice. But I did. I noticed everything. Can I ask you something? He said. Of course. You have children? One daughter. He smiled faintly. You're lucky. Most parents don't feel lucky every day. Some days, we feel terrified. I am, I said. He looked out the window. I wanted kids someday. The word surprised me. You still can. Maybe. A pause. If I don't ruin everything first. Then he laughed at himself. Sorry. I don't know why I'm telling you all this. I smiled. Sometimes it's easier to talk to strangers. He looked at me in the mirror. That's true. The phone buzzed again. This time, he answered. Mark, I'm in the car. A pause. No. I said no. His voice had changed. Sharper. Nervous. I don't care what you need. Then. No, you're not calling her. I tightened my grip on the wheel. A few seconds later, I heard. You promised me this would stay between us. Every instinct I had as a mother suddenly woke up. He listened for another moment. Then his face changed completely. What paperwork? What are you talking about? No, I never said that. His voice was louder now. Angry. The kind of angry that comes from fear. At a red light, I saw him sit forward. What documents? Then. No. Don't touch anything. His face had gone pale. Mark, listen to me. Another beat. Then. Burn them. The light turned green. The car behind me honked. I pressed the gas. Behind me, Jason whispered. Please. Then the call ended. The entire car felt different. Paperwork. Documents. Burn them. Why would someone say that? For the first time since this strange story began. I was afraid. Not of him. Of what I didn't know. Jason looked out the window as though he had forgotten I was there. Then he whispered something to himself. So softly I almost missed it. This wasn't supposed to happen. A chill ran through me. This wasn't about debt anymore. There was more. Much more. We pulled up in front of his apartment. He reached for the door, then stopped. Thanks, Helen. I looked at him in the mirror. He looked like a man standing on the edge of something. Scared. Lost. Almost desperate. You okay? I asked. He gave me a tired smile. No. Then he got out. I watched him walk toward the building. Halfway there, he stopped, pulled out his phone, and made another call. I couldn't hear the words. But whatever he was saying. He was terrified. I sat there for a moment. Then I reached for my phone. There was only one person I wanted to call. Someone I hadn't spoken to in almost 6 months. Robert Parker. My ex-husband. Emily's father. Because suddenly, I had a feeling our daughter was in far more danger than either of us had imagined. I stared at my phone for almost a minute. Then I pressed call. Robert answered on the second ring. Helen? I hadn't heard his voice in months. Hi, Robert. Then immediately. Is Emily all right? Some things never change. A father still worries when his daughter's name comes up. I don't know, I said honestly. What happened? Can I come by? Of course. 40 minutes later, I was sitting at my ex-husband's kitchen table. It looked almost the same. The same coffee mugs. The same blue curtains. Even the same clock on the wall. For a moment, it felt like stepping back into another life. Robert sat across from me. His hair was grayer now. Reading glasses hung from his shirt. He had spent 30 years as an accountant before retiring. The man could spot something suspicious from a mile away. I took a deep breath and told him everything. The Uber rides. The phone call. Emily hearing it. The words. After I marry her, there's money. Robert didn't interrupt once. When I finished, he frowned. What do you think? I asked. I think this isn't about debt. A chill ran through me. I think this is about paperwork. What kind of paperwork? Prenuptial agreements. Power of attorney. Loans. Co-signed obligations. I stared at him. Why? He folded his hands. Because if all he wanted was money, he wouldn't need a wedding. The room suddenly felt colder. I hadn't thought of that. Not once. He mentioned documents today. Robert looked up. What documents? He was on the phone. He sounded scared. I repeated the conversation as best I could. When I got to the words. Burn them. Robert's face changed. What? He told someone to burn the documents. A long silence. Then he stood. When is the wedding? 7 weeks. Has Emily signed anything? I don't know. Has she combined finances with him? I don't think so. He wrote something on a notepad. Then looked up. We need to find out. I frowned. We? He looked surprised. Of course we. For the first time that afternoon, I smiled. Because for a moment, we weren't divorced. We were simply Emily's parents. Trying to protect our daughter. Then my phone rang. Emily. Hi, sweetheart. Her voice sounded tired. Mom, are you busy? I looked at Robert. No. A pause. Then she said. Jason wants us all to have dinner tomorrow. All of us? You too. He says he wants to explain everything. I looked at Robert again. He was listening carefully. Mom? Yes? Can you come? I already knew the answer. Of course. She sounded relieved. Thank you. I put down the phone. The kitchen fell quiet. Then Robert said something that tightened my stomach. Don't tell him what you know. I looked up. If there are documents, we need to know what they are before he realizes we're asking questions. Then he added quietly. Helen. I think your instincts were right. I had been hoping they weren't. I had hoped this was a misunderstanding. A bad sentence. A terrible coincidence. But sitting across from my ex-husband, I realized something. I was no longer worried about my daughter's heart. I was worried about her future. And suddenly, tomorrow's dinner felt less like a family meal, and more like the beginning of an investigation. The next evening, I stood outside Emily's apartment with a bottle of wine in one hand and a knot in my stomach. Robert stood beside me. We haven't had dinner together in, what? 6 years, he whispered. 7. He smiled. Let's try not to embarrass our daughter. I almost laughed. Then the door opened. Mom. Dad. Emily looked genuinely happy. She hugged me first. Then her father. For a second, I saw the little girl she used to be. The one who always wanted both her parents in the same room. Jason appeared behind her. He looked surprised. Mr. Parker. Robert extended his hand. Jason. They shook hands. A little too politely. Then we all sat down. Dinner started normally. Emily talked about work. Robert talked about retirement. I talked about a passenger who had left a birthday cake in my car. Everyone laughed. Even Jason. And for a moment, I wondered if we had made a terrible mistake. Maybe there was no scheme. Maybe there were no documents. Then Jason stood. I almost forgot. He returned holding a large manila envelope. My heart skipped. He placed it on the table. These are some wedding documents. Emily smiled. Oh, right. I looked at Robert. He was staring at the envelope. What kind of documents? He asked casually. Oh, nothing exciting. Jason sat back down. Insurance information. Emergency contacts. A few financial forms. I saw Robert's expression change. What financial forms? He asked. Jason shrugged. You know, grown-up stuff. He laughed. Nobody else did. Emily reached for the envelope. I haven't even looked at these yet. You haven't? I asked. She shook her head. Jason said we'd go through them this weekend. I suddenly became aware of my heartbeat. Robert picked up his water glass. Then put it down. So none of this has been signed? Jason looked at him. No. Not yet. Robert nodded slowly. Good. Emily frowned. What? Nobody answered. Dad? Robert folded his hands. What exactly is in the envelope, Jason? A small smile appeared on Jason's face. The kind people wear when they're uncomfortable. I just told you. No, Robert said calmly. You gave me categories. A pause. I'm asking about the documents. Then Jason laughed softly. Is this an interrogation? No. Robert's voice never changed. It's a question. I looked at Emily. She was confused now. What's going on? Jason reached for the envelope. I'll explain everything this weekend. He smiled. Tonight is supposed to be family dinner. I noticed something. His hand was trembling. Just a little. Then Robert said quietly. Open it. Jason looked up. What? The envelope. Nobody moved. Open it. The room suddenly felt colder. Why? Jason asked. Because if they're harmless documents. Robert smiled politely. There shouldn't be a problem. Emily looked at her fiancé. Then at her father. Then back again. Jason? He swallowed. Sweetheart, this is ridiculous. Then open it. He didn't move. And in that moment, I knew. I didn't know what was inside. But I knew there was something. Because innocent people don't become afraid of paper. Emily looked at him again. Jason? He forced a smile. I don't understand why everyone is acting like this. Not yet. But I could see it. The first crack. The first tiny piece of doubt. She looked at the envelope. Then back at him. For the first time since she had defended him. My daughter looked uncertain. Finally, she whispered. What's in there? No one spoke. Then Jason slowly put his hand on the envelope. And I had a terrible feeling. That whatever was inside it was about to change everything. Jason didn't move. His hand remained on the envelope. Emily looked at him. Then at her father. Jason? He forced a smile. They're just forms. Then open them, Robert said calmly. The room was so quiet I could hear the refrigerator humming. Finally, Jason pulled the papers from the envelope. There were insurance forms. Emergency contacts. A venue contract. And then one thick packet. Robert noticed it immediately. What is that? Jason's face changed. It's nothing. Robert held out his hand. May I? To my surprise, Emily spoke. Give it to him. Jason looked at her. Sweetheart. Please. After a long moment, he handed over the papers. Robert put on his reading glasses and started reading. The color slowly drained from his face. Robert? I asked. He didn't answer. Emily looked frightened. Dad, what is it? He lowered the papers and looked at Jason. What exactly were you planning here? No answer. Then he turned the packet toward me. I looked at the title. Spousal Financial Authorization Agreement. I frowned. I didn't understand. But Robert did. And apparently, so did Jason. This gives you access to her financial accounts. The room froze. Emily blinked. What? Robert looked at her. If this document is signed after the marriage, he could legally act on your behalf regarding certain debts and financial matters. I stared at him. Certain debts? He nodded. Potentially all shared marital obligations. Emily looked confused. I don't understand. Robert took a breath. Sweetheart, why would this even be here? Then he looked at Jason. You said these were wedding documents. They are, Jason said quickly. No, they aren't. Emily turned to her fiancé. Jason? He swallowed. It's not what you think. The oldest sentence in the world. And almost never a good one. What is it then? I was just preparing. For what? He looked at the table. For the future. What future? Emily whispered. He didn't answer. Robert placed the papers down carefully. I've spent 30 years looking at financial documents. He looked directly at Jason. This wasn't put together by accident. A pause. This was prepared by an attorney. The packet suddenly seemed heavier. More dangerous. Then Robert asked the question none of us wanted to ask. Who told you to have her sign this? Jason closed his eyes. Finally, very quietly, he answered. Mark. I remembered the phone calls. The panic. The fear. Burn them. Suddenly, everything felt very real. Emily looked as though she couldn't breathe. You wanted me to sign this? No. The answer came too quickly. I mean, not like this. Then how? Tears filled her eyes. When? No answer. After the wedding? She looked away. Because silence is an answer too. I wasn't going to hurt you. His voice broke. I swear. Emily laughed once. A small, broken laugh. You wanted legal access to my finances. I was desperate. I know. She looked at him again. And that's exactly what scares me. The room fell quiet. Then she whispered. I don't know who you are anymore. I don't think I've ever seen a person break so completely. Jason's shoulders dropped. Because for the first time, he realized he wasn't losing an argument. He was losing the woman he loved. And somehow, I had a feeling the worst part was still to come. Nobody moved. The packet of papers sat in the middle of the table like something dangerous. Emily looked at Jason. Jason looked at the floor. Then my daughter whispered. Tell me the truth. After a long moment, he spoke. I was scared. She closed her eyes. That's not what I asked. Tears filled his. I never wanted to hurt you. That's not what I asked either. The room became perfectly still. Finally, she asked the question that mattered. When you met me, did you know I had money? He looked up immediately. No. Did you know I owned my condo? No. Did you know I was a doctor? No. I believed him. I think we all did. Then she asked. So when did this happen? He swallowed. After my business failed. Silence. I was drowning. He looked at his hands. I kept thinking I could fix it. I could pay everything back. But I couldn't. Tears slid down his face. And then I looked at you. Emily didn't move. I looked at your life. A pause. And I wanted what you had. The room grew quiet. Because that was an honest answer. A terrible answer. But an honest one. Then he whispered. I loved you. Another tear slipped down his face. And I hated myself for thinking about your money at the same time. Emily looked as though she might cry. I suddenly understood something. This wasn't a con man. Not really. This was a weak man. And weak people can do terrible things. Not because they begin as monsters. But because they convince themselves they have no other choice. I never planned to steal from you, he said. I just kept telling myself I'd fix everything after we were married. He looked at Emily. I kept saying I'd tell you the truth. A pause. Tomorrow. Another pause. Next week. After the honeymoon. His voice broke. But I never did. Because lies have a strange way of growing. The longer we wait, the harder the truth becomes. Emily wiped her eyes. Did you ever stop and think about what this would do to me? He didn't answer. Did you think about what would happen if I found out? Still nothing. Then she whispered. Or did you think I'd never know? That question seemed to break him. He lowered his head. And that was answer enough. A tear rolled down her cheek. I defended you. She laughed softly. A sad, exhausted laugh. I defended you to my mother. Then she looked at me. And I saw it. The guilt. Because she remembered every word. You took him out of context. I know his heart. She looked back at Jason. And I was wrong. No, he said quickly. You weren't. But I was. The room fell silent again. Then she whispered. I chose to believe the wrong thing. I wanted to reach across the table and hold her hand. But some heartbreaks can't be interrupted. People have to walk through them themselves. Finally, she stood. Nobody stopped her. She looked at Jason for a long time. Then she asked one final question. If my parents hadn't seen these papers. Her voice trembled. Would you still have married me? Jason's face changed. Because there are questions so honest that they leave nowhere to hide. A long silence passed. Then he closed his eyes. And very softly. He answered. Yes. Emily inhaled sharply. I felt my own heart sink. Because sometimes the truth hurts more than the lie. And I knew, in that moment, our lives were about to change forever. Weak people sometimes make terrible choices. And terrible choices can still break your heart. Emily sat very still. Tears rolled down her face, but she didn't wipe them away. She was staring at Jason as though she were looking at a stranger. Then she asked quietly, "Did you ever plan to tell me?" Jason nodded. "Yes." "When?" He looked down. "I don't know." The answer seemed to hurt her more than anything else. Because there had never been a plan. Only more time. More waiting. More secrets. Then he said something none of us expected. "I was going to destroy those papers." The room went still. "I called Mark today because I wanted him to get rid of them." Robert frowned. "What?" Jason looked up. "I couldn't do it myself." He swallowed hard. "I knew it was wrong the moment I had those documents prepared." A tear slid down his face. "But I kept telling myself I needed more time." Then he looked at Emily. "Your mom heard me on the phone." He glanced at me. And suddenly, I couldn't lie to myself anymore. Nobody spoke. Because for the first time, I believed him. Emily believed him too. That was the problem. Love doesn't disappear when the truth arrives. Sometimes the truth only makes love more painful. Finally, she stood. Walked to the window. Crossed her arms. Then turned around. "I need a minute." She walked into the bedroom and closed the door. The soft click felt enormous. Jason buried his face in his hands. I had never seen a man look so defeated. For a long time, nobody said anything. Then he spoke. "I really do love her. I believe that too." Which somehow made this even sadder. Because if he hadn't loved her, this would have been simple. About 10 minutes later, Emily came back. Her eyes were red. She looked exhausted. She sat down slowly. Then looked at Jason. "I have one question." He nodded immediately. "Anything." A pause. If my mother had never heard that phone call. The room became very still. "Would you still have married me and asked me to sign these papers?" Jason looked as though someone had punched him. He didn't answer. 5 seconds. 10. Finally, he whispered. "Yes." I heard my daughter take a sharp breath. And there it was. The ugly, painful truth. Not what he felt. Not what he wanted. But what he would have done. Emily closed her eyes. A tear slid down her cheek. Then another. When she opened her eyes again, she looked older somehow. As though she'd lost something. Perhaps she had. "Thank you for being honest." Jason looked confused. Then frightened. Because he knew what was coming. "I love you," she said softly. A tear rolled down his face. "I know. And I think part of you really loves me." He started crying. "But I don't know if I can marry someone I have to save from himself." The room seemed to stop breathing. Then she looked at me. And what she said next broke my heart. "I'm sorry, Mom." I frowned. "For what?" She wiped her eyes. "For not believing you." I stood immediately. So did she. And then my little girl stepped into my arms. At 35 years old. She cried exactly the way she had at 5. I held her tightly. "It's all right," I whispered. Her voice trembled. "You were trying to protect me." Another sob. "And I chose him." I closed my eyes. Because every parent knows this feeling. You cannot protect your child from every mistake. You can only stand nearby. And hope they find their way back. After a long time, she pulled away. Then she looked at Jason. A long silence followed. Finally, she spoke. "The wedding is cancelled." The words were soft, but they landed like thunder. Jason closed his eyes. He didn't argue. Didn't beg. Didn't try to change her mind. Because I think he had known. From the moment he answered that question. He had already lost her. And all of us sitting in that room knew one thing. Tomorrow morning, nothing in our lives would look the same. I didn't sleep much that night. I don't think any of us did. Around 8 the next morning, there was a knock on my door. I already knew who it was. Jason stood on my porch. He looked terrible. Same clothes. Red eyes. Like a man who had been awake all night. For a moment, neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly, "I know I probably shouldn't be here." I sighed. "Come in." He sat at my kitchen table. I poured him a cup of coffee. He didn't touch it. "I just came from Emily's apartment." I looked up. She wouldn't answer the door. I wasn't surprised. He swallowed. "I don't know what to do." Neither did I. After a long silence, he said something unexpected. "Your daughter saved my life." I frowned. "What?" He looked down at his hands. "When I met her, I was already falling apart. A failed business. A mountain of debt. I honestly didn't know how I was going to keep going." Then he looked up. "And then I met her." A pause. "She was kind. She listened. She believed in me." A tear slid down his face. "And I think I started loving her before I realized it." I believed him. That was the problem. I believed almost every word. Then he whispered. "And then I ruined it." The room grew quiet. "You made terrible choices," I said gently. He nodded. "You lied." Another nod. "You planned something unforgivable." I know. A tear rolled down his cheek. But I never stopped loving her. I closed my eyes for a moment. Life would be easier if bad choices only belonged to bad people. But they don't. Sometimes people love deeply. And still hurt the people they love. He stood and walked to the window. "I canceled the venue this morning." I looked up. The florist too. The photographer. A sad smile crossed his face. "I spent 3 hours canceling a future that doesn't exist anymore." I didn't know what to say. Some moments simply hurt. No lesson. No wisdom. Just pain. Then he reached into his coat pocket and placed a stack of papers on the table. "The documents. Every one of them. I want you to have these." I looked at him. "Why me?" He swallowed. "Because your daughter trusts you." A pause. "And right now, I don't trust myself." That answer stayed with me. I called my attorney this morning. I told him to destroy every copy. I looked at him. "And?" A tired smile crossed his face. He said he'd never seen a man sabotage his own engagement before. Then he took a deep breath. "If Emily ever speaks to me again." He stopped. "I want it to be because she chooses to." A pause. "Not because I manipulated her." I stared at him. Because that was the first truly selfless thing I had heard him say. After a while, I asked softly, "What are you going to do now?" He laughed. "I have no idea." Then he looked at the papers. "I think I'm finally going to deal with my debts. And maybe figure out how I became this person." He wiped his eyes. "I kept thinking money was my biggest problem." It wasn't. What was? I asked. He took a long breath. "Fear." I nodded slowly. Because I think he was right. Fear of failure. Fear of losing everything. Fear of not being enough. And fear can make people become strangers to themselves. He walked to the door. Then stopped. Helen? Yes? A long pause. Do you think she'll ever forgive me? I looked at him. At the man who had almost become my son-in-law. At the man who had broken my daughter's heart. And somehow broken his own too. I don't know, I said honestly. He nodded. I figured. Then I added softly. But forgiveness and trust are not the same thing. He looked at me for a long moment. Then smiled sadly. I know. He stepped outside and disappeared down the walkway. I stood there for a while. Then I looked at the papers on my kitchen table. The wedding was over. The lies were over. But somehow, I knew the story wasn't finished yet. 3 days passed. Emily barely left her apartment. She took time off from the hospital. She slept at odd hours. And she cried. A lot. I know because I stayed with her. Robert came by too. At first it felt strange. The three of us sitting together again. Ordering takeout. Making coffee. Talking quietly. Not as husband and wife. Just as parents trying to hold their daughter together. On the 4th day, Emily finally spoke. We were sitting in her living room. The wedding invitations were still stacked on a shelf. The dress still hung in the spare bedroom. A future frozen in place. She looked at us and asked. How did I miss all of this? Neither of us answered immediately. Then Robert said softly. Because you loved him. She looked up. I should have known. No. He shook his head. You should have been able to trust him. Tears filled her eyes. I feel stupid. I moved closer and took her hand. No, sweetheart. She looked at me. You believe the best about someone. That's not stupidity. She started crying again. Then she surprised us. Do you think he ever loved me? The question hung in the room. I looked at Robert. Neither of us wanted to answer. Finally, I said quietly. Yes. Emily frowned. You do? I nodded. I think he loved you very much. A tear rolled down her cheek. Then why would he do this? I thought about Jason sitting at my kitchen table. Then I answered honestly. Because loving someone and deserving them are two different things. A pause. And because sometimes people let fear become bigger than love. The room fell quiet. That evening, after Emily finally fell asleep on the couch, Robert and I stood in the kitchen. I poured 2 cups of tea. He smiled. You still make it too strong. I laughed softly. And you still complain. For the first time in days, we both smiled. Then his face became serious. I've been thinking. About what? About Jason. I looked at him. He made awful choices. Yes. But I don't think he's evil. I nodded. Neither did I. Robert sighed. I almost feel sorry for him. I looked toward the living room where our daughter was sleeping. I don't. He smiled. You're still the protective one. Always. Then he looked at me. You did good, Helen. I frowned. What? You trusted your instincts. And you protected her. I looked down at my tea. Some compliments hit differently when they come from someone who has known you for 30 years. I almost didn't. But you did. A pause. I think Emily will remember that for the rest of her life. I felt my throat tighten. Then the doorbell rang. Both of us looked up. Almost 9 at night. I opened the door. Jason stood there. He looked even worse than before. He held a small white box in his hands. I know this is a bad time. I said nothing. He swallowed. I need to give this to Emily. I looked at the box. What is it? He looked down. Our wedding rings. A long silence. I had them resized yesterday. He gave a sad laugh. I guess I forgot life doesn't wait for your plans. Then he looked at me. Please. I hesitated. Behind me, I heard footsteps. Emily. She had woken up. She stopped when she saw him. Nobody moved. Jason looked at her. Then held out the box. Very softly, he said. I think these belong to you now. I had a feeling. This was going to be their last conversation. Or perhaps the beginning of something neither of us could yet understand. Jason stood on the porch holding the little white box. Emily stood in the hallway, looking as though she hadn't slept in days. For a long moment, they simply stared at each other. Then she stepped forward. I quietly moved aside. So did Robert. Some conversations belong only to two people. Jason held out the box. I think these belong to you. Emily looked down at it. But she didn't take it. You should keep them. He shook his head. I can't. They were supposed to mean forever. His voice cracked. And now they just feel heavy. Finally, Emily took the box. Very carefully. As if it might break. Or perhaps as if she might. I canceled everything, Jason said. The venue. The caterer. The photographer. A sad smile crossed his face. I even canceled the honeymoon. Emily said nothing. I guess there won't be much need for 2 tickets to Italy. Then he added softly. I picked Italy because you once said it was your dream. Emily's eyes filled. Because heartbreak doesn't erase the good memories. It leaves them sitting beside the bad ones. I loved planning that trip, he said quietly. I even learned how to pronounce half the cities. A tear rolled down his cheek. And now I don't know what to do with any of it. Neither did she. Neither did I. Finally, Emily spoke. Why did you come? I needed to give these back. A pause. And I needed to say one thing. He took a shaky breath. I did love you. Every dinner. Every phone call. Every stupid argument about paint colors. That part was real. Tears slipped down his face. But I understand if you don't believe me anymore. Emily looked at him for a long time. Then she asked quietly. If you loved me, why didn't you stop? The question seemed to break something inside him. When he finally spoke, his voice was barely above a whisper. Because I was afraid. I was afraid of losing everything. Afraid of failing. Afraid of becoming a man with nothing. He swallowed. And somewhere along the way, he looked at her. I became exactly that man anyway. The silence that followed hurt. Then he said something none of us expected. When your mom called you from the car. He smiled sadly. That was probably the best thing that ever happened to me. Emily frowned. What? He nodded. If she hadn't, I would have married you. And I would have lied to you. I would have spent the rest of my life pretending I was a good man. Another tear. I don't want to be that man anymore. The porch became perfectly still. I looked at Robert. Neither of us spoke. Because sometimes the truth arrives too late. But it still matters. Emily wiped her eyes. You hurt me. I know. You made me question everything. I know. And I don't know if I'll ever completely trust you again. He nodded. I understand. No excuses. No arguments. Just acceptance. Then she surprised all of us. I believe you loved me. Jason looked up sharply. She held the little box against her chest. I do. Tears filled his eyes. But I also believe you would have married me and kept lying. He closed his eyes. Because she was right. And that's why I can't marry you. No anger. No shouting. Only truth. Sometimes that's harder. Then she took a step forward. I forgive you. He looked stunned. A tear slipped down his face. But forgiveness isn't the same as trust. His shoulders fell. Not because he disagreed. Because he knew she was right. For a long moment, neither of them moved. Then he asked softly. So, this is goodbye? Emily looked at him. And for the first time, I saw something besides pain. I saw uncertainty. Finally, she answered honestly. I don't know. The words seemed to surprise even her. I just know I can't marry you. Jason nodded slowly. Then he smiled. A sad, tired smile. You've always been the honest one. That almost made her laugh. Almost. He took a step backward. Then another. And looked at me. Helen. Yes? He smiled sadly. Thank you. I frowned. For what? For loving your daughter enough to become the villain in my story. My throat tightened. Because every parent knows this truth. Sometimes protecting your child means they won't understand you right away. But you do it anyway. Jason looked back at Emily. I hope you're happy someday. She whispered. I hope you are too. He nodded. Then turned around. Walked down the steps. And disappeared into the darkness. For a long time, nobody moved. Then Emily looked down at the little white box in her hands. Opened it. And began to cry. Because inside were 2 rings. And an entire future. That no longer existed. A year later, I was driving again. Not every day. Just enough to keep myself busy. Retirement is funny. You spend 40 years wishing for free time. Then one morning, you realize you miss having somewhere to go. So I drove. I listened to strangers. And every once in a while, one of them reminded me that people are complicated. More complicated than we want them to be. It was a warm September afternoon when my phone rang. Emily. I smiled before answering. Hi, sweetheart. Hi, Mom. She sounded happy. That alone was enough to make my day. Can you come to dinner tonight? I think I can manage that. Then she hesitated. And Dad's coming too. I smiled. That no longer surprised me. After everything that had happened, Robert and I had become friends again. Not husband and wife. That chapter was over. But somehow, we had found our way back to being a family. We had Sunday dinners now. Sometimes we even argued about football again. Life is strange. Sometimes a crisis puts broken things back together. I'll be there, I said. Then she added. Mom. I have someone I'd like you to meet. I smiled. Oh. Don't get excited. Which, of course, immediately made me excited. That evening, I arrived carrying a peach pie. Robert was already there. He opened the door. You're late. I looked at my watch. I am 2 minutes early. Exactly. I laughed. Some things never change. Emily hugged me tightly. She looked good. Better than she had in a long time. The sadness that had lived in her eyes after the cancelled wedding was gone. Not forgotten. Just healed. Time doesn't erase pain. It simply teaches you how to carry it. Dinner was wonderful. We laughed. We told old stories. At one point, Robert spilled iced tea on the tablecloth. Emily and I laughed so hard we cried. For a few hours, everything felt light. Then there was a knock at the door. Emily smiled. That's him. I sat up straighter. Robert raised an eyebrow. The door opened. And I nearly dropped my fork. Jason stood there. The room froze. He looked different. Healthier. Calmer. Less tired. He held a bouquet of sunflowers. Emily's favorite. He smiled nervously. Hi, Helen. I blinked. Then looked at my daughter. Then back at him. Finally, Emily laughed. I knew this would be awkward. Awkward didn't begin to cover it. Jason stepped inside. He nodded at Robert. Mr. Parker. Jason. Still awkward. Very awkward. Then Emily took a deep breath. I should probably explain. I sat down. Because yes. She absolutely should. She smiled nervously. We started talking again 6 months ago. I nearly choked on my tea. Robert looked about the same. Jason stared at the floor. We had coffee. Then another coffee. And we kept talking. Finally, I asked. Are you together? Emily looked at Jason. Then back at me. A little. I almost laughed. A little? What does that even mean at 36? Then Jason spoke. We're taking things slowly. Very slowly. He smiled nervously. I still have a lot to prove. I looked at him. How are the debts? He laughed softly. Almost gone. I blinked. Really? He nodded. I sold everything I didn't need. Took a second job. Moved into a tiny apartment. Robert looked impressed despite himself. I've spent the last year cleaning up my mess. Then he added. By myself. That mattered. I think we all knew it. Emily reached for his hand. A small gesture. But a mother notices everything. Then she looked at me. I didn't invite him tonight to surprise you. She smiled. I invited him because I wanted you to see something. I waited. She looked at Jason. Then back at me. People can change. A pause. They don't always. But sometimes, they do. I looked at the man sitting across from me. The man who had once nearly destroyed his future. The man who had hurt my daughter. The man who had spent a year trying to become someone better. Finally, I smiled. A small one. Then I asked. So, what happens now? Emily laughed. I have no idea. Jason laughed too. Neither do I. Then he said. But this time, there are no secrets. I looked at him for a long moment. Then nodded. Because that's all any of us can really ask for. Honesty. Another chance. The courage to do better. Later that night, after everyone had gone home, I stood on my porch with a cup of tea. The street was quiet. I thought about the phone call in my car. The documents. The cancelled wedding. The tears. The rings. And then I thought about tonight. About forgiveness. About second chances. About how life almost never follows the script we write for it. I smiled. Because sometimes a story doesn't end with a wedding. And it doesn't end with a goodbye either. Sometimes. It ends with a door left slightly open. And the people standing on either side of it. Simply deciding to try again. My dear friends, if today's story touched your heart, tell me in the comments, do you believe people can truly change, or do broken trust and old mistakes stay with us forever? And if you enjoy heartfelt family stories like this one, please subscribe and join our little family here. Until next time, take care of the people who love you, and never underestimate the power of a second chance. Good night, my friends.